My name is Ronan Murphy. I lead the Tech Policy Programme at the Centre for European Policy Analysis here in Washington, D.C. At CEPA, we strongly believe that a strong transatlantic relationship is good for the United States, it's good for Europe, and it's good for the world in general. This goes beyond tech policy. A healthy relationship is good for security on both sides of the Atlantic. EU-US trade remains the largest trading relationship in the world, so a healthy relationship is also good for business. Malfunctioning relationship would be bad for business. So in the spirit of a strong transatlantic alliance that CEPA espouses, we're delighted to be working with SCSP here at the AI Expo to present this panel on securing the future EU-US-China tech relations. I'm going to introduce our guests for today, starting with the head of the European Union delegation to the United States, Her Eminence Ambassador Jovita Neliupšienė. The ambassador has served in government in her native Lithuania and has also served on the nation's behalf in Brussels, so is well versed on the EU and all that it means. We're also joined by Senior Advisor to the Office of the Secretary of Defence, David Rader, a former infantryman. Mr. Rader also serves as Deputy Director for the Office of Global Investments and Economic Security. And André Loesekrug-Pietri, I hope I haven't mangled it, André, is the chairman of JEDI, which is the Joint European Defence Initiative. That's a private initiative seeking to leverage European innovators in big picture moonshot projects. Welcome, André. And rounding out our panel is CEPA's CEO and President, Dr. Alina Polyakova. In addition to leading CEPA and being my boss, Dr. Polyakova is the Donald Marin Senior Fellow at the Kissinger Center for Global Affairs at SICE, leading expert on transatlantic affairs and technology policy. Now, as an Irishman, I could stand up all day here and talk to you, but that's not what you came for. So allow me to thank SCSP again for co-hosting, and can we welcome our guests on stage here, please? Look, we've set the scene, securing the future. I've talked about a strong transatlantic alliance. And I'm going to turn to you first, Ambassador, to maybe set the scene as you see it in terms of where the transatlantic relationship is, where you'd like it to go, and what's happening with regards to tech policy, security policy.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And it's wonderful to see a full room. Next year, maybe you do a bigger room so we can invite more public. So first of all, let me start. We are witnessing the transatlantic relations for 80 years. We had bumps and ups, but we actually achieved quite a lot. With the EU and US constitutes 30% of global trade. Our population actually lives in the thriving democracies, have a possibility of freedom of choice. We are together leading in a lot of technologies globally. We actually together are setting standards, and there are many more things we are doing together. Like we employ on each other's continent more than 16 million people, and we provide the prosperity for our people. When it comes to tech or to trade policies, you can always look at the upsides and downsides of this relation. But let's be clear: U.S. is leading in tech policy, and we have a lot to catch up. But I always say, when you recognize your problem, you probably can pick up from there and actually walk the talk, what you really want to do. And in the most recent Draghi report, which was actually, I have to admit, it's more quoted here in the United States than in Europe. So in Draghi report it's a very clearly noticed that European Union at this moment is lagging behind in innovation in some key technologies. And if we want to remain the trusted and the most valuable partner for the United States, we have to keep up. That's the essence. And we have to be serious about that. And look, I am a EU ambassador here in DC, and I really recognize the problem. And I think that the Commission and European institutions, they see that there is a huge opportunity for us actually to take it from there and to invest. And there are several, let me just give you maybe 4 points on where we see the priorities. First of all, of course, the future technology or nowadays technology which will lead us into the future is definitely AI. And in the Paris summit, Commission President von der Leyen actually announced that we have to mobilize 200 billion euros to invest AI. Mostly this, first of all, to our AI factories and AI gigafactories to ensure that we give access to computing power for small and medium companies, as well for startups, but as well for the researchers to have a possibility and to have people who are innovating in there. Then you have, of course, in order to have someone to come to those gigafactories, you have to unlock financial opportunities for the startups. We do understand that the technology, the fastest development of technologies right now in their hands. This is where we see the potentials. We have financed over the 20,000 startups in the last 10 years. The thing is that we are very good in the seed period, but when it comes about scaling up, this is where we have to improve. This is our second priority. And then you have, if you have a gigafactory in upcoming a couple of years, you have good and viable, good and thriving startup community. That's good, but nothing of that it works if the AI would not use. I think that one of the major third probably point of our AI strategy is actually adoption of AI. Right now we see it's around 13%, maybe up to 15% of the European companies who actually adopt and use the AI in their daily business. I think this number should increase if we really want to catch up, because that would help to develop technology that will drive innovation within the companies. Last but not least, and again I will not shy away of mentioning, we have to look into how actually our legal basis work for that. It's EU is the bunch of 27 member states, some bigger, some smaller. And if you are American company or if you are American scientist and you decide to come and work on AI, so probably having 27 different regimes and going and trying to understand the 24 different languages in the EU, it would be complicated. So the idea is actually for the tech companies in the technology field, either actually to have a more level playing field and EU regulation, so everybody can feel that actually wherever they start the business or wherever they want to expand their business, they will face the same rules. That does not really mean that we are not aware that the technology is developing and we have to keep up with that. So our idea is actually, hopefully, just right after the summer, to make sure to review by that time our rules and regulations which we have on digital, on tech, to make sure that we don't have too much of the burden on small and medium business. That actually opens up the possibility for the innovations. I know that in US it's called deregulation. We called it simplification, but this is what is coming. I will stop here and maybe leave the space for the questions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'm going to turn next to David Rader. David, working with allies, an important part of what you do. Tell us more about what the agenda is, what you're focused on, what you're talking about at the moment.
Yeah, I'll pick up real quick on the ambassador's comments about deregulation, and I'll add to it. This administration's one of their priorities, of course, is deregulating the competitive landscape for tech at home, which we're hoping then gets passed along to the rest of our colleagues as we really set the foundation for how we think about this infrastructure, the ecosystem. But more importantly, and I'll say this administration, but it is a multi-party, multi-generational shift in the United States, is aligning private capital and our capital markets, which are the best in the world, with Europeans right alongside us, to align to strategic goals and targets within the national interest. So getting money. So we've stood up things like the National Security Capital Forum at the Office of Strategic Capital. Let me back up. We stood up the Office of Strategic Capital, which is a $100 billion loan fund within DoD meant to provide capital to areas where the market is too harsh. The National Security Capital Forum, the Council on Global Competition and Innovation, they are meant to bring together capital allocators into a strategic alignment, so it's no longer capital over here, national security or government interests over here. And those are the things that we think will really serve as kind of money multipliers, if you will. And I know that's a term in hard economics, but let's use it for tech here. That will be the money multiplier for our ability to really scale. And so all these different programs we have coming out, Replicator, Replicator 2, which are DIU or DoD initiatives, are really meant to go from, you have a concept, we want you to prototype, clear the valleys of death, which is it's kind of a misnomer, but it's the word I'll use because it's colloquialism, to then go to full scale, into recurring revenue through DoD and into commercial use. So it becomes commercially viable, commercially sustainable, we can export it, and we can align around kind of a baseline standard and product capability for interoperability. So those are a lot of big words, though, to say the DoD historically always viewed these things as separate things. That's R&D over there, that's innovation over there, that's money over there. We are finally fusing these together and finding which protons and electrons, are attracted to each other so we can match our capital markets to our national security interests. But we can't do this alone, and we shouldn't do this alone. A, because markets don't operate that way, technology doesn't operate that way, and we don't operate that way, and we don't want to. The United States doesn't want to do this alone. We're not going to do this alone. Our transatlantic relationship and our relationship with our partners across the Indo-Pacific are, I would argue, the strongest they've been in a long time. They have a clear pathway forward. There are quirks in that statement, and I understand that. But I will say that with the threat coming from Russia, with the threat coming from China, it is clear as day where we want to come and where we want to be in the world. And the Europeans and the Americans, I would argue at least, and luckily Ambassador will get with me on this, is we are lockstep on addressing these problems and making sure we can go back to a world at peace that's focused on health development, tech, commercialization, and our priorities. So this administration, the secretary are laser focused on that, and our commercial partners are coming along with us, and actually they're leading the charge in some areas. There's some areas where, the commercial sector outruns the defense and the government sectors often, but we're seeing them dive in, in rates in which we've never had before. Venture partners, private equity is actually starting to execute capital into roll-ups. We're starting to see some really fun things that are telling us that this is going to be a healthy and robust ecosystem as long as government deregulates and gets out of the way in some areas and puts up parameters where it needs to on others, and really just lets markets and innovators flourish the way they're meant to do. So that's where I see fits and starts over the last few years really kind of getting narrow and precise now in a really bipartisan focus, and that's where the U.S. is going to head for the next at least 4 years, but probably for the next 20 or 40 years.
Thanks, David. So both talked about capital, both talked about money and putting the money in the right place and allowing scale up or commercialization, the word you used, interoperability. As somebody, André, who's working in this area, looking for money to put into projects, trying to get projects started, how do you see this panning out? What's happening for you?
Absolutely, you need a woman behind it. The name of JEDI was invented by our former Minister of Research, who was the first female European in space. So she came up with this great idea. No, it's great to be here. So thank you for inviting me. Well, I will take a different stance. First, why are we here? I think the ambassador said it rightly, but I think understanding or even falling in love with the problem, the real issue here is do we go into execution? And I all encourage you, because we spoke about Draghi, to see the fantastic video of Mario Draghi, who was the former Prime Minister of Italy, in front of the European Parliament. That was a month ago, where with his wonderful accent said, "You ask me what to do, I don't know, but do something." His report has been out for 1 year. 1 year. Nothing has been done. A lot of things have been talked about. The Draghi report is the most cool thing to talk in town, be it in DC or in Brussels, but execution matters. Speed matters. Scale matters. And that's the thing that the ambassador very rightly pointed to, is that when you look at technology, the risk is exactly the same everywhere. In Menlo Park, in DC, in Shenzhen, in Munich, or in Toulouse. But in this world where you need to make big investments and big bets, OpenAI is a big bet, DeepSeek is a big bet, The Apollo program was a big bet. Well, the downside is the same everywhere if you talk in financial terms. But the upside is national in Europe, one of the 27 countries, and it's continental in China. So I would argue, and I know that goes against the conventional wisdom, that it's not necessarily a money issue. Money is important. More money is always better than less. But it's a question of, do we have this continental scale? And today, the delusion in which the Europeans have been for a long time is to think that they have a single market. There is no single market in cyber, 27 watchdogs, plus a 28th one from the EU, which is based in Athens. Energy, think about just France and Germany. Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, will be in town on Thursday. Think about two most different countries like France and Germany who are opposing on everything on energy. So every future-looking topic, you have 27 different AI strategies. And that's where the AI Act is interesting, because there was a one act, but right now we are seeing 27 countries putting 27 local rules, adding to this fragmentation. So I think the first thing to consider is let's not be delusional and think about what counts in the world of tomorrow. Second thing, I would argue that it's of national security interest for the US. And I thank you very much, sir, for your call on transatlantic and working with partners and allies. Is right now the big risk, I think, for the US is that Europe becomes kind of a technological black hole. Where I don't know if you saw Andrew McAfee's, and the Wall Street Journal published that yesterday, a similar graph, where you see the market cap that has been created in the last by companies under 50 years old. In the US, it's a huge graph. And in Europe, it's basically not as big as one single dot. And that explains the 30% GDP per capita difference in the last 20 years. I mean, 20 years ago, Europe and the US were at the same level of GDP per capita. Today, we are 30% under. It's maybe not well distributed. That's another issue, important issue. But the difference is huge. And you just have to come. I arrived yesterday evening. Well, when you buy your coffee at $10 in the Marriott, or if you a single dinner with friends is $500 without the tip, you realize that you have become poor in Europe. So I think it's national security interest for the US, because if Europe becomes a black hole, you'll see the debate happening right now in Germany. Should we really stop relationships with China? Should we see ourselves as the trusted partner? And I think it's really important not to sever the ties, because otherwise the risk, there are a lot of tendencies in Europe to kind of keep the relationships with, I would say, more authoritarian regimes up and going. That's my second point. And my third point is we're in a world of big bets. And today, the continent that is not doing any bets anymore is Europe. Again, OpenAI, remember, Europe wanted to have its own Google. So for the last 10 years, we invested hundreds of millions, if not billions, in doing a Me Too. Google search with keyword. And you have, probably we were a little bit sloppy and we didn't read the 2018 paper on transformers, the T of GPT. And in 22, you have these guys who came up with this idea, well, actually, we could do search with prompts and with natural language. You probably saw first quarter 2025, first time Google search went down in absolute numbers. So there's a real disruptions. That should have been European. Fast forward, January 2025, Europeans are so much on energy and on green and sustainability, rightly so. You have DeepSeek, probably with a lot of hot air, with a bit of using the results of OpenAI, etc., for the search, but they come up with 97% better inference efficiency. And again, radically disrupting, or at least disrupting the traditional trend of AI, more compute, more nuclear power, more GPUs, etc. So again, what I want to say is that from a European point of view, we need to get inspiration of this capacity of, again, radically disrupting, reshuffling the card. And the two examples I showed you is a good example that actually hope is there. Everything can be reshuffled. Think about the car industry. That's my third example. The Chinese could not make it in thermal engines. They were not good at creating very efficient thermal engines with very little particle, very little energy consumption. they went all in on electrical cars. And one striking example, when I took my my flight here, it's the first time that the Uber who brought me to the Paris airport was a Chinese car, and the Uber that brought us to Washington, D.C. downtown was a Chinese car. So it's coming. So again, we need to project out. So we need to reinvent this capacity, and I think we can only do that together. And I hope we can deepen, maybe with also some of the people on the panel, all of them. I think we need to establish, Alina, some kind of a track 2 that we keep this very strong tie on what are the topics that democracies need to address together.
Thanks, André. So, Alina, you've heard from the other 3 panelists already. The Draghi report has changed something in Europe. I mean, competitiveness is now front and center. There is a change in the Commission's attitude, European attitude. It's a big, complicated place. There's a lot to play for still. What do you see happening next? What are the rushes in the wind for you, the reeds in the wind?
Well, thanks, Ronan. Thanks for that easy question. Again, thank you to STSP for hosting this with us together now for the second year, standing room only. Really appreciate everyone's time. As I was just listening very intently to what everyone on the panel said, and often we have these conversations on the state of Europe-U.S. relations. They turn a little negative. And I was really happy to hear that we're talking about the same things here. We're talking about the need for Europe and the United States to be on the same page. We need each other to outcompete China. I think that's the bottom line. Obviously, the U.S. is leading in a lot of scale tech, and I think that race is over in Europe, unfortunately, for all the reasons that André mentioned, Ambassador alluded to, one being that there's no single market, and that's probably not going to change anytime soon, for better or for worse. But despite that, we need European researchers, we need European talent, we need the investment that American companies have made in Europe to continue to produce results as they currently are in driving innovation, not just in the broad tech sector, but also in defense tech. And I think we're seeing a lot of the results from that, as we speak. And over the weekend, we saw some, I think, quite sophisticated, innovative uses of defense technologies, particularly in the autonomy space, in the operation the Ukraine Special Forces carried out in Russia. Incredible stuff. And this is the area that is transforming not just our societies, not just how we use Ubers or the automotive industry or other industries. It's transforming how we are going to look as militaries across the board, how we're going to be able to fight future wars, and what that's really going to look like going forward. And I think, David, you probably have some thoughts about that, given that you sit over in DOD. So would love to hear from you, I think, in this conversation. But I think a couple of just points to reflect. One, in this positive agenda. My concern with Europe has been for a very long time that if Europe doesn't scale up, it doesn't commit the right resources and the right capital, that in the very near future, meaning 3 to 5 years, most likely, the gap in innovation is going to be so big because the U.S. is running so fast and we are taking big risks that there's going to be no coming back from that. And as someone who has been deeply invested in the Europe-U.S. relationship my entire life for many reasons, first and foremost because I think it's good for America, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see Europe in the dark ages when it comes to tech. And Europe has become a global regulator, but not a global innovator. And I think that has become prohibitive for a lot of companies that are trying to scale in Europe and can't, and they move to the United States, so they look for other opportunities. And I don't want that to continue to be the case. The second point I'll make, which I alluded to at the top, is how inexplicably linked security and technology are now. And we recognized this as CEPA some time ago. It's why everything we do has a tech lens to it. But I think certainly there's no question to my mind that what we're seeing happening in Ukraine in particular is going to have lessons for a very, very long time, including in the Indo-Pacific theater. And in that domain, I think we have to really ask ourselves, about open source. I'll just put that out there because this is the big debate happening now. What is the future of open source? But as we have seen with previous technologies like Android, for example, which is open source tech and is run by about 70% of smartphones. It's, a lot of us have iPhones, but iPhones don't dominate the global market. It's Android because it can run on any hardware, right? Any phone, Samsung, whatever you have, it can run on. I think this is the future. This is where AI is moving. It's where all the big risk takers are moving. And I think this is where we also have to think about how is that going to intersect with our own national security concerns and objectives, right? Whether that's from the US government perspective or from a transatlantic perspective. So I hope that one of the conversations we can have going forward is what are the opportunities for a positive agenda? What is our tech vision 2030? China has its vision. And to your point, André, they've been executing on it. They've been executing strategically and intentionally, and we have not. And by we, I mean Europe and the United States together. The US has been running, Europe has not. And I think this is the reality that we live in. And I think the future doesn't look great if we continue on these very, very disparate tracks. So I think this is time to really think about what is our vision for 2030 and get serious about investment, get serious about probably changing some of the regulations that the EU has worked on. The AI Act comes to mind first and foremost, but there's others. How can Europe position itself to take advantage of the tech revolution in a way that will position Europe as a global player and that will be a strong ally and partner to the United States, I think is the question that we're all trying to grapple with. But I think this conversation is a really, really strong beginning into that direction.
Thanks, Alina. So I'm going to come back to you, Ambassador. We heard a lot there. I take a slightly different view maybe to the one we heard on DeepSeek. DeepSeek for me highlights that there is a race to be run here. Using what's available. It also questions the use of capital because they use less money to do something that everyone else, allegedly, I mean, it's to be seen. There's a lot in there, but let's just take it as it happened, and it happened cheaper than it could have happened elsewhere, perhaps. That means there's opportunity still. It also raises the question of China and China in general and how China is perceived within Europe when it comes to these sort of policy decisions, competitor, rival, threat. There are the AI race is not run. There's still a huge way to go. Digital sovereignty is a question that was half touched upon there. I want to bring it in as well because is there a path forward that doesn't involve working with big US tech firms for Europe? Is that on the agenda? Does sovereignty have to mean that? How do you see all that coming together in the shape of the competitive compass, which is a roadmap for Europe? It is something that Europe wants to achieve.
Is there the way how US actually can work without Europe? And the answer is no. Honestly, almost 200 million users of Amazon actually are in Europe. Almost 300 million of Instagram users are in Europe. We have more Google search users than you have population in US. 40% of Microsoft turnover is generated in Europe. Around 30% of any of the companies I mentioned actually is generated in Europe. So when you say that there is something very wrong with Europe, so where is this other market where you actually can scale your technology? Where is there other market which actually adopts American technology in such a massive scale? Otherwise, we're in Europe. Can you tell me actually where else your cloud services actually more broadly spread or more broadly used down to really the most secret services which can be provided on cloud than in Europe? We actually are your scale up, your invention, your innovation, and really the talent pool. And I think that's probably is the most important part of the relation. I would personally wish, actually, even if I would not be the ambassador, would wish that the balance would be different. I would wish that we would not spend a month for $3 billion on all those sources from public money only. I would wish that it would be different. That's why we actually are mobilizing this money. We managed actually to mobilize in first 4 months, right now already $10 billion to finance those AI factories. And we will continue. So it's not really that everybody is just talking. Yes, it's a pity we have to concentrate some of our AI factories and capabilities in some countries. We cannot scale up in all 27 because of the due other concerns, which actually I think that all of us we are facing, be it energy, be it talent, be the resources, and I think that should be taken into account. And honestly, when you think about all the things which we need to build together, be to face the challenges of the competition with China, with non-democratic or the authoritarian regimes. I don't know any other partners with a part of EU and US which we could actually do together. Yes, few countries in the Indo-Pacific. Yes, we have to rally them as well, but otherwise. Sorry, guys, you cannot build your chips because the printing machines are in Europe. That's a reality. This is disbalance, but on the other hand, we actually are like two hands. Maybe one is left, the other is right. Well,
we're not commenting on left or right-handedness.
It's kind of where we are. But I think that only working together we actually can achieve the results. And it's one is the positive agenda. Another we can talk about negative, or if I don't know if export control is a negative agenda. For me, it's very positive. I spent 3 years dealing with that. It's very positive. But so it's about the technology which we share, about the talents which we have, about the fundamental science which we have. If you think DUI, I'm sure it's probably not all the information is public. If you look at the project, some of them which are coming and related with Europe. If you think about quantum computing, you will have to do that with Europe at this moment. Hopefully, we will keep up. I hope we will keep up. And there are many more examples. And if we don't set the standards, China will do.
I think that's a vital point. It's a vital point. And David, might come to you very quickly. If the US and the EU don't work together, and like-minded allies, then China might set the standards. Recently signed a deal with the UK on unmanned systems, in particular, defence agreement. Is that something you'd like to see repeated? Something along those lines with other partners? What's the best path forward here? I hear consensus here. Everyone wants this alliance to work. There might be an imbalance. There is an imbalance. I think that's clear. Particularly when it comes to services. There's still a lot to offer on both sides. What would you like to see, just from the defence perspective, even to start there?
Yeah, I used to be an investment banker, and I say that to say I think very surgically about growth and markets and capabilities. Not every country or market can be good at everything, and countries need to acknowledge it. And the United States too, we have our own limitations, so this isn't a shot at anybody. They need to acknowledge where they are going to hit the wall and where they need to rely on allies and partners to fill that gap. And so there are some areas where we're starting to realize that the United States cannot go it alone and our allies and partners cannot go it alone, so we're going to do co-development. So the US and the UK just rolled out a joint counter small SUAS capability, which, of course, if you just saw the news yesterday with Operation Spiderweb, you're looking at us going, oh, shoot, we're in trouble. The United States, the Europeans could not defend against that kind of attack. And it's not a judgment. It's just because until it happens, you don't think really about it in that scale. You're like, oh, we never thought about this. We've talked about counter drones because of Syria and attacks in there. So anyway, long story short is this is a problem, though, to having small drones at scale attack a strategic target, overwhelm sensors, overwhelm defenses, and crush critical infrastructure. It's going to take decades to rebuild. If you knocked out 40% of strategic bombers in the DoD right now, it would take us, I'm making this up here, but 7 to 15 years to replace those. At best. Like if we got everybody that woke up at the same time, every morning went to the office, spun their wrenches, it would take us 7 to 15 years to do that. Europeans would take even longer. So we have to co-develop these things to accelerate the timeline and find markets that can have interoperability and scale. So we rolled out one for small UAS with the Brits. There's legislation in this last year's NDA that has the US doing it with the Israelis. NATO, Diana, NIF, you can point to a whole bunch of things where we are starting to work together very closely because we realized, to the ambassador's point, to all the points made up here, the U.S. can't go this alone, Europeans can't go this alone, and we need systems that work together to cover the same threat because it's so complex and it moves so quickly that we also don't have enough resources to have one person. Like, you're going to have the Army counter-UAS office just solve this by themselves for the world? Of course not. You never would. There's no way to even address the scale of the requirement. So the being put against the corner, and it's at the Winston Churchill quote, like the U.S. always does the right thing after exhausting all other options. We're going down that path again with rare earths and magnets. We're going down that path with counter drones and counter U.S. capabilities, and we're going down that path with a whole bunch of other emerging critical technologies, AI, quantum, biomed right now, because we are starting to get to that point where we're looking around going, if we don't get our stuff together, we are going to be screwed. And we need to do it together, and we need to do it quickly.
Yeah, and that, I mean, yeah, I like the quote. I like that. I mean, and it's a good habit, though. I mean, there are habits on both sides. Some are good, some are bad. But you try and do it yourself, and then you find out you can't, then you buy it. Right? It's a big buy or build sort of question. Alina, I might come to you next. You've always made a good link between security, technology, and economic activity, and how that's important, and how all of this is important, and that the importance of the balance in the relationship in the long term. And the other thing I want to ask you about. The Ukrainian strike over the weekend, Spiderweb, I think is the title. Ukraine's in Europe. You know, I mean, this was a European initiative. Sure, it's not in the EU, and that's a longer discussion, but that's where it started and that's where it's happening. So there is something to come from that. Is there anything you'd like to add, Alina, at this stage?
Well, my usual thing I say at this stage is that I think we need to also see Ukraine as the future for Europe's defense and security, not as a vulnerability, because I think throughout the duration of the full-scale invasion, we've seen how necessity really drives innovation. And the Ukrainians have basically taken all the rules off because they've had to, because they're fighting for survival. And that has produced incredible innovation that, you know, as David, I think, very aptly said, we don't know what deterrence looks like in this space now. And they are revealing that we have our own vulnerabilities, not just the United States, but I think across the transatlantic domain within NATO. We've done a huge amount of work, as you know, Ronan, on interoperability in the military domain, but there's also a big question about digital interoperability across the alliance that we haven't even really scratched the surface of. And that's a huge, huge question. And things around like cloud come into that. How do we scale? How we all use the same systems? How do our systems talk to each other? And I think in Europe, the challenge is that you have the EU, of course, but then you have all the member states and the UK on top of that. And I think there's a big question as how all of that works together when you have the EU also jump-starting investments, which are positive and things are moving. But I think speed is the big question here, too. You know, how quickly will European militaries really ramp up to be able to learn the innovative and adaptive technologies from the battlefield in Ukraine? We know, because we work with so many European companies as well in the defense space, that the companies that have had kit and software in theater in Ukraine have grown exponentially. So have American companies taken advantage of that. Some of them are here in the expo. And they are driving innovation. We need more of that. And I think the future to me is very clear. Ukraine can be the defense industrial base for Europe. They can build millions and millions of drones and other sophisticated battle-tested capabilities that Europe cannot build quickly enough itself. Certainly it will take a long time for Europe to build its conventional military capabilities. There's a huge, huge opportunity and potential here, I think, for both sides. And I think this is also something we should be thinking about. How do we invest to reap the rewards and the return on investment that we have an opportunity to get right now? And again, just going back, what is that comparative advantage, right? To your point, David, what is the division of labor that we want to achieve between Europe at large or maybe European member states, right? Just last comment I'll make is that there's fantastic examples in Europe of how to do it all well. And one of them is Poland. I know Poland just had elections. I won't comment on that. But Poland is about to spend 5% on its defense. And it is a country that is economically dynamic, vibrant, and growing. And one reason for that is they've been able to really take advantage of foreign direct investment, most notably from US companies that have invested very, very heavily, and as a result have produced thriving tech ecosystems in the country. And I think this is a lesson that countries like Germany can take, France, and others that have, I think, been overly focused on regulation and have not been able to take advantage of the innovation that investment from the United States in particular can provide, as well as the lessons learned from what's happening in Ukraine today. And I think we have a lot to learn there as well, to David's point earlier on whether we're really set up to fight the global wars of tomorrow or not.
And to that point about investment in defence, Commissioner Kubilius unveiled a new EU defence fund a few months ago. Commissioner Kubilius' existence is a new departure for the EU. He is a defence procurement commissioner. That's a totally new role. Nothing like that has happened in the EU before. This is happening in some shape or form, Andrew, and there are European providers who are looking to take advantage here and looking to get up and running. How are they progressing? What are you seeing?
Look, I think we're in a world where there's little space for second spots. So just having somebody with a title is good, but we are not in a world of relatives. We're in a world of absolute. A drone strikes you or not. So just saying, and on that one I would disagree. Yes, of course we can always say things have changed, the mindset have changed. Well, if even somebody so sophisticated and diplomatic as Draghi is losing his nerves and calling CEOs. That was just 2 weeks ago at the European Roundtable in Rome, saying, you need to call up public opinion because politicians are not moving fast enough. I don't know what we need. Just one word where I a little bit disagree. Division of labor. Didn't we learn the lesson with China that a pure division of labor puts that in a very bad spot? I think there is a difference between being, totally self-reliant and being sovereign. And I'm not happy with the picture that has been depicted by the ambassador. Because when Starlink closes the signal over Crimea, Europeans have zero way, and Ukrainians have zero way to direct anything. When tomorrow intelligence is estimated 70 to 80% with geospatial intelligence, where we depend on the US. It's not to be against the US to say we need to have our capacity to take our decisions alone. When French public bank BPI or German bank KfW puts money in startups, 30% goes directly into Azure, into 365. Is that the best use of public money? I don't think so. So it's not... Actually, you can be, that's why I said it's a national security interest for the US that Europe does not become a black hole, because if you become a servant, if you become dependent, you are not going to be a strong partner. And you will definitely not be able to help the US when it's needed, because at one point we probably will need to. So I think it's in the interest that we have our tech giants. It's in our interest that we have a much stronger tech sector, because as Alina said, tech is today the base of growth, of jobs, and also of democratic opinion making. I mean, I don't have to remind you that for people under 30, 50% of your political opinions are shaped through social media. So it is it's deeply political. So I think Europe has to become sovereign, not cut off, but sovereign. And on that one, I think we have completely failed. So we need to have a radically different way. I will give you two examples. David mentioned about critical raw materials. The EU has decided 2 years ago that 30% of our electricity should come from wind farms. Since on-land wind farms are not, it's more and more difficult politically, we do that through offshore farming. We need permanent magnets in order to reduce maintenance cost and have not gearboxes to reduce mechanical parts. You all know by now that 92% of neodymium or dysprosium comes from refining in China. It's not the mining which is the issue. It's that China, for 15 years, under our eyes, in a very transparent way, has put itself. 2 years ago, I went to the Commissioner for Energy, who was an Estonian, so now I'm more relaxed in front of our ambassador, And she says, yes, André, it's a very important topic, but it's not my topic, it's the topic of the research commissioner. And then I went to the research commissioner who said to me, it's a very important topic, but our plans are done in the current financial framework, so you need to wait for 2026. And then you see the current administration in the US doing a mineral deals. Maybe it seems a bit dramatic and chaotic from Europe, but there is a strategy. So what I'm calling for is we need to go from big announcement, we need more strategy. What we are missing today is strategy. What are the areas where we need to be independent? When we launched 2 rockets last year and SpaceX alone did 134, there is an issue. It should be code red. Did we change the rule of the European Space Agency, which decides that we need to, I personally think that these, I should not say that in front of an American audience, but that's like that. I think these AI factories is a total disaster, Madam Ambassador, because do we need 14 factories where we're going to spray and pray them and hope that the money will be, we probably need 2, but we don't have the courage in Brussels to say we're only going to do it here because otherwise we want to please. We always try to mix excellence and redistribution. And you don't need to be mathematicians to understand that 2 unknowns with 1 equation is suboptimal. We need to have redistribution, totally important political thing, and we need to have excellence. We need to have much more excellence, focus, and not spraying too thin. And this is probably where the EU, either it changes or we will have what happens in Poland. I think that our citizens see this, and they see that politics don't have impact anymore. And when you have 30% gap in GDP to capita, that is one criteria where somebody can judge or not if a politic works, and it didn't work. So we need to have, I think boldness should not be the monopoly. That's why I'm wearing this cap that I took away from on the request. I totally understand from Alina. I think we should not leave boldness to the extremes. We should not leave boldness to authoritarian regimes. We need boldness in the center of the European Commission, in the center of the European Parliament, in the center of the European CEOs. Where are the big bets? Where is the metaverse? That failed. Where is the OpenAI? That worked. Where is the Starlink? That worked. This is what we need in Europe, and it's possible. A lot of Europeans, as the ambassador said, are working in US companies. So we need to reinvent that.
Decidedly French view there, Breton-esque on digital sovereignty, though. You're championing the idea that the EU can do this overnight. I mean, I'm not sure that's a practical solution. There's going to be work. There has to be work. With
Breton had this sentence, the former commissioner, he said, democracies are by definition slow. If we accept that, then we are dead. I think if democracies are not fast again, we're going to lose to authoritarian regimes.
That might be so, Andrew. But I mean, I could mangle the other Churchill quote about democracy being whatever, the worst possible system apart from all the other ones available. I'm not sure AI factories are an election issue anywhere.
No, that's for sure. Look, we have been lagging behind in this area. I think that we need not actually 12 or 16, we actually need maybe even 20 or 25, because we need a computing power. This is the thing, and we need the companies actually to have access. We need to grow those companies. The problem is that our companies are small, so we can go back and forth and say, like, we cannot actually invent big tech companies within an hour or within a year. So we have to grow. Then you have to be careful what you wish for. If we grow, then the question will turn into how this transatlantic relations will be there. And look, European Union as an organization never invested before in defense capabilities. Never before. For the last 3 years, we actually are procuring lethal materials for the third country who is not even a member state of ours. We're doing that for Ukraine, and we are actually not only procuring for them, we are providing money for 55 billion for their defense investment actually comes from European Union country. And on top of that, we're keeping their economy afloat with 100 billion for that. So this actually, the miracle which you see unfolding is a European miracle in general, because it's our money, it's our taxpayers' money, but we are doing that for the sake, not only to help Ukraine, but because it's a question of the security, is an existential thing. On top of that, what we are doing for Ukraine, we actually invest. Yes, it will not happen. Yes, Kubilius is just maybe just a title. He comes with 150 billion of euros just within the EU money. And no, sorry, but we cannot spend the money with the executive order because we are an international organization. We have to issue the regulation how we'll spend the money. Yes, that's slower than the US system. But it will come. It's coming. And I don't think that when we will reach the point when we will start spending the money, hopefully by the end of this year, that we will be doing something which would be against a European interest. No, it will be for the European interest. It will be interoperability with NATO requirements, because nobody is setting new other standards on the European side. Will be the NATO standards, and the money will actually, first of all, is dedicated to the innovation part, in defense industry, because we haven't financed by EU money that before. This is absolutely new thing, and I think that we have to give at least few months to start doing that. For European Union, it's a lightning speed. If you ask me, I would like that it will go like in a few weeks, not few months, but this is how we are. And just a point, nothing of Poland and as well as Lithuanian or as well any other European miracle would happen if not 200 billion a year invested from the European money. So all the infrastructure, everything what is in Poland is actually European money, not only American investments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And as a citizen of a successful EU member, can't put it any way, we get money from the US and companies from the US and the EU all the time. It's fantastic. I'm going to move to the floor here. And before I do, I must remind you, because Alina mentioned it, and you actually reminded me as well, Ambassador, those who got a seat are seated on reports from SEPA, including one about interoperability, about resilience, about standards in NATO, particularly when it comes to the cloud. And please go to sepa.org. But I'm going to go quickly. We've got a lady here in the front who is going to ask us a question. Diane's coming on. This lady will go next. That's okay. You might state your name and any affiliation at the top.
Hello, I'm not sure if this is working, but I'm Lara Spirit from the Times of London, and my question is for the Ambassador, if I may. The UK has secured an agreement to possibly avoid tariffs on cars, on steel, on aluminium. Do you think this shows that UK is in a more nimble and stronger position having left the European Union? Still selling Brexit. I like it. I'm going to take this lady's question and give the Ambassador a chance. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Dr. Elaine Soreo. I'm Associate Rector of a private Ukrainian university, Ukrainian American Concordia University, which has still been operating throughout the war. And it happens to also be the only Ukrainian business university EU accredited. My question is this. Overall, this could be for anyone on the panel because it covers so many different things. What can be done in the present to approach the present administration, which has been running hot and cold regarding the EU and our interests in the EU, our support for the EU, our backing away from the support to the EU, and so forth. And particularly at this time when, for instance, last week, King Charles spoke to one of our neighbors about the crisis here that back and forth is creating in Americas.
Okay, a bit about the political backdrop there. Ambassador, do you want to refer to the UK question?
Well, it's always good when your neighbors succeed, and we'll wish UK all the success. I'm sure that we will manage to get a deal or some kind of the landings. We'll find a landing zone because, well, but I cannot restrain myself by saying we regret, and we don't think that tariffs are actually the best policy choice. but it's of course the sovereign choice. We're here to find the solution there. Who is better off and who is worse off? Still to be seen. And I don't think that there are AI, technology, big tech, and the issues we are discussing here are much more important than to spend our time on tariffs.
Okay, thank you. And on the Ukraine question, is there anyone who wants, David, I don't know if you want to mention anything there, Alina, is there? I won't put you
Can
on
I
the
just
spot.
say one word on Ukraine? Because I think Alina mentioned on what Ukraine is showing us is that, and that is an opportunity for the US and for Europe, is that AI, robotics, is changing the nature of manufacturing. The number is 100,000 drones in 23, 1 million in 24, estimated 4 to 5 million in 25 from Ukraine. Russia kept that pace too. The EU, since 22, has increased an average 30%, not per year, 30% its output. So that's not what I call war economy. There is an opportunity with these new technologies to actually do much more flexible manufacturing. That means less dedicated assembly lines that can assemble different things, that can scale from 1 to 10. And this is an opportunity. We talk a lot about reindustrialization. Reindustrialization is not to bring back the old factories, but is to invent the factories of the future. And this is a topic, a very specific one, which I think is important for this administration here, is super important for Europe. I think that is one topic we should work together.
Thank you, Alina.
Ukraine is showing the way.
Okay, and well, look, we can do very quickly one more question. This gentleman, very quickly. I don't know if I can get him. He's fourth row. There you go, Danny. Thank you. Very quickly, thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Arlen. I'm a consultant with TMG. My question is for the ambassador. Just to make things clear and also to keep it short, what is the European Union's message to, for lack of a better word, American big tech?
Come and invest in Europe. You always have us here. We are the best business climate you can find in the world, and I think that's probably what to say. And we are really keen in making sure that the competitive is there to review our regulations, because it's, well, hopefully September is pretty fast for that. And honestly, I think that. Investment innovation is really not only the talk. We will walk that talk, and this commission will do.
Alina.
Just a quick wrap-up comment, since I know we're at time. But I think there's also a discrepancy between, we're here, André and Ambassador. Obviously, there's been a conversation here, but I think it's indicative of what I often hear in Europe is, one, we need to move fast, take big risks. Speed is the essence, which I personally agree with. But at the same time, Europe is slapping a lot of constraints on large U.S. companies. That's true. And it's making it difficult for these companies to roll out some of their product there. That's also true. So when it comes to wanting more U.S. investment, especially from some of these large tech companies, the business environment is challenging. And I think you hear that all the time from all the companies here. So how do you reconcile that? How do you ask U.S. companies to come in, keep investing, U.S. defense companies to keep investing, when they're hearing a lot of these kind of sovereignty question marks saying we can't be dependent anymore on you. But I think there's also a limited market. There's only so many countries in the world that have the defense industrial base to be able to supply European needs or any needs. The US is number one. There's also a limited number of countries that have the companies to be able to produce the kinds of hyperscale products that Europe also relies on. US is still number one, but China is very, very, very close behind. And so the concern I have is that Europe hasn't been able to grow its champions yet. Hopefully that will happen. But what is going to happen in the meantime, right? If Europe is telling the United States, look, we don't want to be dependent on you guys anymore, where are you going to look to? Is that going to be China at the end of the day? Because there's a limited number of suppliers here, right? And I think these are the questions that we need to be grappling with. And unfortunately, I hear that a lot. And I go to Europe all the time. I'm heading there tomorrow for a big conference we're doing there on this exact same topic yet again, together with Ronan. And I hear a lot, well, we can't rely on you anymore. And Starlink is the example. Well, okay, that happened, the intelligence sharing came back on, just because of that one, say mistake, blip, the U.S. is suddenly an unreliable partner. I mean, come on, give me a break, And like, how do you going to reconcile all these things? So I don't want to start a conversation about divergence. We had such a positive conversation about how do we work together. I think that's what we should focus on. But I think we also need to acknowledge that some of the asks that Europe has to the United States and the way that some of the regulatory agenda is moving forward is not working together, is actually quite at odds with each other.
Thank you, Alina. And I might add my two tuppence, we call it in Ireland, 2 cents, I suppose it is here. It might be something that shines with you, David. I think there's a buy or build decision to be made every day. This is your investment. This is your commercial decision. Do we buy this? Do we build this? And some of it's commercial, some of it's strategic. You're not going to make all these decisions in one go. So I'd like to see continued engagement, things like this, things like we don't know about are going on. I think everyone would. I think there's definitely a base to build on, a long storied base to build on, and we shouldn't forget that. But listen, thank you very much again to everybody. Thanks to SCSP for co-hosting. And I think we should give all our panelists a round of applause.